One of your first clients for your very first startup was Manchester United. True or false?
True.
You also had the German national football team.
Yep.
You had players in the Olympics,
Absolutely.
players in the Euros, players in the World Cup as well.
Yes.
You achieved six figures in your very first startup within 3 years.
True.
The company's still around today.
False.
Even though you had so much traction and even though you were working with some of the biggest sports teams, brands, entities, how can you run out of money?
I do believe entrepreneurs are born, not raised.
I'm the kind of guy who always tells people to tap into their competitive advantage. So what competitive advantage did you have?
I truly, truly believe that A, customer service in a B product is completely better than A product in a B customer service. Being a single founder does put you at a disadvantage with investors. And they'd rather bet on a team rather than bet on a horse.
Tarek, one of your first clients for your very first startup was Manchester United. True or false?
True.
Other honorable mentions, and this is not something a lot of startups can show off. You also had the German national football team.
Yep.
You had players in the Olympics,
Absolutely.
players in the Euros,
Winter and Summer Olympics, by the way.
which is unreal. And then you had players in the World Cup as well.
Yes. The World Cup in South Africa and the World Cup in Brazil.
In your very first startup. Unreal. True or false? You achieved six figures in your very first startup within 3 years.
True.
True or false? You were actually ahead of the market with the technology you had designed.
That is very unfortunate, but it's absolutely true.
You met Cristiano Ronaldo. True or false?
No, false.
Okay, interview's over.
I would have loved it. He was before my time as well. So rather after my time.
Unfortunate mistiming of events. And then true or false? The company's still around today.
False. It was post-acquisition. The company was acquired. Post-acquisition, it was dissolved into the company that acquired.
Okay. I want to dig into this point at the moment.
Absolutely.
So your first startup was IC Solutions, correct?
Yes.
And can you just give us a quick summary of what IC Solutions did?
Yes. So today everybody is seeing this huge, nice, very interesting fad of people sitting in an ice tub. So today it sounds very nice for us to sit and then, you look at someone and it's good for your skin, it's good for your hair, it's good for your health and blood sugar and so on and so forth. But back looking 10 years ago, professional athletes were doing that as a form of therapy. They still do, of course. I think Cristiano Ronaldo is one of the more famous ones.
Absolutely.
Who swears by the cold therapy. But the idea is that only professional athletes were doing it at the time, and it was not mainstream yet. I was at university at the time, and we were part of a class called Turning Technology into Business. And the whole idea of it is take a specific technology, and we're a team of engineers, and try to turn it into a business, find an application for it. And there's specific methods to it. And funny enough, during the university days, you're always watching shows. So whether it's, Suits or any other one of those shows, and obviously you can rip off the internet so you can watch the whole thing because we couldn't afford to pay for it. We saw in one of the American football shows that we had that there was athletes sitting in cold tubs. That was the first time we actually saw the therapy. The first
Actual cold tub.
actual cold tub. So it was a big garbage bin. It was a garbage bin. Okay,
The plastic ones.
the big huge ones, and it's just full of ice. So you have someone just dumping buckets of ice into it, putting a thermometer, and then waiting for it to be, let's say, 4 degrees, 5 degrees, and then asking the athletes to sit in. So in the show, it was basically them using the therapy. But that was the aha moment that we had because we were looking for a specific application. So we dug into it a little bit more. And sure enough, it was a very known therapy. And the biggest problem with the therapy was the temperature was super hard to control. You can imagine if you're cooling down a body, you want the water to be 5 degrees, you put ice, you wait 5 degrees, then you sit in. But imagine doing that for a whole football team.
Of course.
So an American football team, you have 42 players. So then you have one person, 3, 4, 5. First of all, the size of the tub would take a ton of ice. And then at the same time, once you get all the ice in, then it warms up by the time the 6th and the 7th and the 8th. So it's just very, very rough therapy. If you can, as you can imagine, it was a huge hassle. Now imagine you're doing that when you're at an away game. This means when we control our locker room in the sports world, then it's all prepared in the back while the game is going on. But when we go visit, then you go, you play the game, you get in the locker room, you're lucky if they give you towels and hot water. And that is true all the time in the away games. It's always the absolute minimum on the other side. So if you want to take on your own ice and your own tub and your own thermometer, Good luck with that. And cold therapy, it's best done within usually 15 to 20 minutes after the workout is done. And this is typically what they usually do it. So you finish, you get straight into the tub, and then you shower and you get dressed. So that being said, this is where we thought, hey, we are engineers. We can find a solution for this problem. And we actually invented a product that is ideal for the cold therapy at the time. And it works in a very simple way. It's exactly like the water filter that you have today. You connect it to a tap, water comes in, comes out clean. So we had a product in which you connect it to any tap, from your kitchen to your sink to anywhere else. And then you sit on the screen, you set on the screen that you want 6 degrees, water comes in, immediately is out at 6 degrees with unlimited capacity. You can fill a tub, you can fill a pool. And this is ideal for the application that we wanted. And that was actually the first product.
But it sounds like this is what you studied, but you come from an aerospace engineering background.
Yes.
Very interesting how, and we'll talk about this more, you started pivoting right at the beginning. It's almost like you were inching to pivot.
Yes.
So what was the story about acquiring these very big clients? Did they start as a big client like Manchester United, or was there an earlier story?
Well, there was an earlier story in terms of smaller teams. But for us, and again, the story started during university. So we were 2 engineering students. We came across this technology, we found the application, and then together with the professors, we actually designed and fully developed this product. And then the next step is, let's show it to a few clients. And we already knew that only the top professionals do this game, this therapy itself. So you have to go to the ones who are on top of their game. And we started with the Dutch league. So the Dutch football league, you have Ajax Amsterdam, you have Feyenoord in Rotterdam, for example. And at the time, also another big club in Rotterdam was Sparta Rotterdam. So we actually completely by cold outreach on LinkedIn, we reached out to the physiotherapist. And the university that I studied in, Delft University of Technology, it's a very well-known university, definitely in the Netherlands, but also within engineering. And we said, we're 2 students. We developed a product that could help you in your cold therapy. Can we come and show you? And luckily for us at the time, the therapist himself, he was a true believer in technology and was willing to try. So I said, sure, why don't you guys come in at a certain date? And he gave us an appointment. And we physically rented a van. We loaded up, and the machine is the size of this couch,
wow.
Just to give you a bit of a perspective, because it was just a bunch of pipes and cooling material that's sitting on a panel. There was no design to it whatsoever, just a box. And sure enough, we actually went to the appointment and we showed him the device. And this was a funny story of the first sale, because we went there to demonstrate, to take some measurement, to get some feedback, do this, change this, and so on and so forth. Little did we know that the therapist at the time, he actually invited the entire management team of the football team in the stadium to say, hey, there's this new innovation coming from this university next door, come take a look so that we can be the first to utilize it. Because obviously you can imagine there's a huge publicity.
Just from a cold outreach on LinkedIn.
That's cold outreach on LinkedIn. But it was to the right person with the right attitude of, yes, let's see what this innovation is all about. And we went there. Even the demonstration was in an inflatable tub. So we just bought a cheap inflatable tub, which we filled it up, and we turned the device on, and we set up the device. And in that, plain and simple, so the therapist said, okay, you guys can set up over here. And it was just in the outdoor area of the stadium. I'll go get a few of the staff come back. And this is when we realized it was a full-on presentation, because he came back with the CFO of the club, 2 or 3 key people, the trainer, the assistant trainer, and all of them, they're coming here to see what's this amazing innovation that's coming out of university. And for us, although it was the ideal platform, but at the same time, you have these 2 students who were not prepared in that sense. And again, we were going to get some feedback.
Yeah.
Things like, make it yellow, make it blue. I like it. The wheels might be a little bit bigger as engineering students. So this is exactly, how we were thrown into that situation. And at the end of the day, we got there, we plugged in the machine. They looked at it. They asked very few questions. And then obviously the money man just said, okay. He just looked at the coach and he said, do you like it? And he said, look, this is very important for our therapy. I think, yes, we would like to try it. And he just looked at us and he said, how much is that? Looked at my co-founder. How we knew it cost us around 15,000 euros to put it together because we were just buying pieces. And we just said 18,000 euros. It cost plus pricing. So it cost us this much, 3,000 euros for both of us, 1,500 sounds amazing.
Not too shabby.
He just said, great, send us an invoice and the guys will send you the delivery address next week. Nice to see you guys. Shook our hands and the team was off. And we looked at each other thinking, damn, that was the first sale. Now we need to go register a company. So that was the story of the first sale. We went back to university. We told our professor exactly what happened. Again, he was expecting some feedback. And that was the ultimate MVP, if you will, because it was a sure sale. And the funny part is the only machine we had was that machine. And the training camp was next week. So we actually ended up giving them that same device for 6 weeks. And then parallel to that, we had to go and design rather and build another device as well so that they can continue it for the rest of the season.
Incredible first sales story. Usually it's not as glamorous and it's not as successful as this one.
Usually that's not a glamorous and definitely not at that price point.
Of course.
Because eventually, you learn in school, it's all about, value-based pricing and so on and so forth. But that was also for us, it was a double-edged sword. So the story of such a sale, as you can imagine, on the way back, we were thinking, okay, so if one club bought it at 20,000, multiply that by, the Dutch league has 18 teams, so 18 times 20,000, okay, that's gonna be fantastic. How about then we go to Europe? So you look at the French league, the German league, the Premier League in the UK. We didn't even get to the US yet. We're gonna be billionaires.
You're assuming everyone's gonna buy
it. And that's the story that you build in your mind. But in entrepreneurship, that actually ended up being a like I said, the double-edged sword. And the reason was because you always have the early adopters in business, no matter what product you have, no matter what service. And those early adopters are the ones that, one, they need it the most, and they're willing to take that extra step. So, and eventually that ended up being a story of of the startup, in terms of we ended up selling 5 other devices at the price point of 20,000 euros within the next year. But the first client, they bought it because, again, it was innovation, it was good PR. The second client was the Dutch Olympic team, and they bought it because, again, the function was fantastic, but they paid for it that much because they had extra budget that they needed to actually spend before December. The third team, they bought it, they wanted a device for research. So the intention was they also did it for research and so on and so forth. If you look at those 3 clients, each one bought it for a different reason. From a company perspective, from an entrepreneurship perspective, you think, I sold 3 devices, 20,000 each, that's 60,000. Again, you do your multiplications, you show your Excel sheet, you're going up. But if you look at how Steve Blank, for example, defines entrepreneurship, in which you need to find the repeatable business model. And you have to look at something that is scalable. But by scalable doesn't mean that I can sell to 1 million people. It means that those 1 million people are going to buy the exact same product and have the exact same problem and have the exact same value, or see the exact same value that you're bringing to them. So by us selling to the early adopters, that gave us a bit more of, hopium, so to speak, that this is exactly what it is. And now we just need production capacity. But it masked the fact that those early adopters were buying it for 3 completely different reasons. And that story basically carried out a little bit later in the company of ICE Solutions in itself, in which the model was not scalable, was not repeatable. Because when we got to the 5th, the 6th, the 10th client, all of a sudden they don't need it. At least the value to them wasn't 20,000 euros, wasn't worth this much. And that slowed down. Now we ended up countering this by launching a second product as well that actually was selling quite well as well. But eventually that story was fantastic at the time. But looking back in perspective, that was also the type of thing that they warn you about a lot. And there's a lot of research about it, that's why they say MVP. Before you actually can raise money, And before you can, go full on in growth mode, you need to make sure that you have the right value.
You made 6 figures within 3 years. And when we spoke off camera, you mentioned that eventually the startup had to be sold for financial purposes. You ran out of capital.
Yeah.
And I just can't help but think, even though you had so much traction and even though you were working with some of the biggest sports teams, brands, entities, how can you run out of money? Where did the ship go wrong in terms of steering it?
Yeah. Well, I mean, this eventually is a bunch of factors as well. Companies don't fail from a single point. The vast majority, they just run out of capital due to either mismanagement of capital, and mismanagement has a lot of negative connotations usually, because it's not mismanagement in terms of you take money away or you pay yourself a hefty salary, or someone steals money, or and so on and so forth. Mismanagement of capital, it also means that it's either you spend too much, you grow too fast, you invest too much in the wrong inventory, and you have little oversight, or you're just too ambitious. So all of them, they get into this. So how did we run out of money? Eventually, actually bringing it back to the point we had earlier. So you have clients buying the product for different reasons. We went and we're thinking, okay, we need inventory for the next 30, 40, 50 devices. And if I look purely at timelines, so sports teams, they used to invest in new equipment either at the end of the season, so that's around June, let's say if you look at football, or in the winter break, which is December. Okay? Our product takes 8 weeks to produce. So you don't take the order in June and hope to deliver it in September, because they buy there, they use there, the players go away for 2 to 3 weeks on holidays, they come back and everything should be ready and done. So you need to deliver during this time, which means you always needed to keep some inventory, although it wasn't sold in advance. So you do demonstrations, but you don't get orders till, for example, June. And you have 1 to 2 weeks to deliver that order, because those are the 2 weeks in which everybody's on holidays. So if you look at those very simple logistics, so you always have that decision before June comes in. So you're looking at April, I need to start production of 10 units, and you need to be selling them by June. If that doesn't happen, you invested, you're in the hole. If that does happen and you get extra orders, you're going to miss out because you're not ready for them, and now you miss. So the logistics for type of business like ours needed to be managed in the right way. But also at the same time, as a startup, we had not raised a lot of money in itself. So although over the 3 years we had generated over €1 million in revenue, but eventually you're still looking at the investment that we had was still extremely limited. But also at the same time, the market was very small. So when you go to look at Manchester United, for example, and we're taking that as an amazing story, but the type of clubs that were doing that type of therapy was Manchester United, maybe 3-4 other clubs out of the entire Premier League.
The ones who had money.
For sure, the ones who had money. So even the ones who were doing it, the problem wasn't big enough for them to invest an X amount. And so that leaves, 4 or 5 teams in the Premier League. Fantastic. Maybe 2 or 3 teams in France, maybe 4 or 5 teams in Germany, and so on and so forth. So all of a sudden, it's not the market of every single sport club that you have, because our market analysis says, so you have every single sport club in every league, and then you have every sport. So then you finish football, and then you go to rugby, and then you do tennis, and then you do this, and
the world is yours.
All of a sudden, you have a market size of a few million devices that you can sell. But in reality, obviously, it was not the case, and you bump into this in the market itself. So eventually, capital was extremely important, and that was actually the reason we were talking earlier about. We were too early in that market, and by too early, that connotation specifically is talking about the number of professional athletes who cared for that therapy to be very specific. So, for example, the team at Manchester United, they wanted their athletes to be in the tub for 60 seconds at 8 degrees. Our machine is ideal for that. Every other club just wanted cold water. And so many times we'd actually go to demonstrations, especially when I was living in the Netherlands. We'd go to demonstrations. Tap water was 10 degrees. Tap water was 10 degrees. And then if you want 8 degrees, it's it's not even necessary to have a machine. Certainly, it's not worth investing 20,000 euros for it. So although that was a side note, but a lot of the professionals were not looking at that in the same way that we thought. No, you must have it. The research was there, and then fast forward 10 years. Today, there is an opportunity for consumer products. There's opportunity for amateur athletes to do the therapy as well. There's products for it, different price range. Technology went hugely changed in the last 10 years. That our device doesn't need to be worth 20,000 euros, even if you look at value-based sales as well, because there's so many other alternative therapies that can still get you to the same value or the same results or benefits of cold tubs as well.
With a lower price point, I assume.
With a much lower price point. Even our device, if we go back, I'm sure if we start this again today, our device would be much cheaper.
I mean, this is a question I wanted to ask while I was doing my research for the episode today. I'm looking here at the market statistics, and it says the hot and cold therapy market is worth or was worth approximately $1.4 billion in 2024 and is expected to reach $3.2 billion by 2035.
Absolutely.
So with the learnings you have in mind, and you had almost patented technology, I would assume.
Absolutely.
Why don't you start it again? You were one of the earlier players. Did that ever occur to you? Was that a thought that crossed your mind?
Every single time I see someone getting in a tub on Instagram or selling something, I think like, damn, I should have done that. Or I would do it again. But honestly, at the end of the day, today I see it as becoming a bit more of a crowded market, although it's growing. But the differences between the different teams is much smaller between the different products. For example, today, because a big part of what you do in the therapy is no longer the cold water. It has developed so much more into the actual benefits of it, right? And today, I think me and you are both wearing a tracker without mentioning the name, but
unless they sponsor us.
Unless they sponsor us. So, but it is about the power of data. So a big vision we had was eventually, whether you're using cold water, whether you're using, top machine, whether you're using a cheap machine, you still can achieve cold water, and you sit 5 minutes in cold water. It's about the effects of what you're able to trace. So the industry has moved so much more from products themselves, an actual physical product, which eventually, which essentially what we were selling in the first place. So it's not really. It's no longer about the product itself. It's so much more, because we've moved so much more away in the therapy. And now, funny enough, there's so many more people doing it that even there's so much more research. So at the time, every time there was a research coming out of cold therapy, it's something we used to celebrate. And we had very few competitors at the time. And we used to actually, if it's something beneficial for us, we'd blast it everywhere and send it to all our clients. And if it's something that says, meh, cold therapy isn't that fantastic, we just be very mum about it and don't talk about it. Or obviously, share it and say more research needs to be done, which is, the typical line that you always put in a medical research.
One thing that seems to be very common about what you did was the pattern recognition approach, whether in consumer behavior, in client behavior, and you're just trying to spot the patterns, right? You're telling me about the logistics process, and then you're telling me now how the users behave over time and how they care about the metrics and not just the benefits. With that being said, one thought that would naturally occur to me, and it looks like you took a different route, is I have these learnings now from IC Solutions. So even if I no longer am operating this company, maybe I'll operate something similar. But you moved on to founding or co-founding a company that gamifies practice on medical devices.
Mm-hmm.
Completely different from what you studied and completely different from what you founded and what you found some success in. And this is where I'm curious as to the rationale.
Yep.
I'm the kind of guy who always tells people to tap into their competitive advantage. So what competitive advantage did you have going into this medical industry?
A big part of the competitive advantage that an entrepreneur has, and I do believe, I think we'll get back to this, I do believe entrepreneurs are born, not raised. But that was a matter of capturing an opportunity. And that came from actual working within the ice cold. So one of the clients that we had was a medical facility. So one of the hospitals that was close to our university, they heard about what we were doing. They got in touch with us and they said, we are conducting research on the effect of cold on pain. Not sport, on pain. And that was in an anesthesiology department. So they got in touch with us, and obviously medical research, they have, plenty of money. So money was not a problem. And they had a small lab, and they were saying, we are conducting the effect of cold water, 6 degrees, 8 degrees, 12 degrees, whatever, on pain. And the experiment was extremely simple. A bucket of 6-degree water, put your hand in there for the studies that they were doing. And then they had to, fill up a few questionnaires. So given that, they actually ordered our device. So they took the device, we sold it to the hospital, they put it on the side, they were doing experiments with it. And in our continuous account management for them, we realized that one of the biggest issues that they were struggling with in the hospital itself, and that's purely from chats with the doctors, is, today you go and buy a big MRI machine. It could be Philips, Siemens, whoever, right? Those MRI machines, those, big things, it's like an oven, you sit in there. Those easily cost, I don't know, €500,000, million euros.
Peace.
So you buy one of those, brand new, and then you get someone from the company who you probably pay 10, 15,000 euros a day to come and give you a lecture or a presentation on how it works. And then at the end of that day, he gives you a book, 300-400 pages big. Says, this is the manual. If something goes wrong, if you know how to operate it, good luck. And so then if you look at it this way, a lot of the nurses that take this training, they obviously still struggle within the first few sessions that we were always, and even they were all joking around saying, first few images we take are either insufficient quality, we have to do it 4 or 5 times again, or just not representing what we need to do. And this is where we got another aha moment, completely different. Say, okay, so this is a problem that we can solve. And one of our team members at the time, he was also big in gaming and was very good in designing games on his free time. And he was an industrial design engineer, an amazing designer himself, and an excellent engineer. And he was the one who was the product designer actually with us. But also within gaming, within programming, he was doing his own projects on the side. And this is where we were, when we were, engaging this conversation, the idea of this is a problem. Is it big? Absolutely. Is it significant? Sure. We asked a few more doctors, specifically on equipment. So when you get equipment, how difficult it is to learn on this equipment. And MRI is the easy one. X-ray devices are the easy ones. But think about, what if you're in the middle of a surgery and you get new devices that you actually need to use in a heart surgery or in a brain surgery? You don't want someone to do the first few uses of it in sufficient quality. You want them to be 1000% ready to use that device if you're the patient. And actually, in engaging that conversation, we found out, wait, this is a big problem. We did a better market research this time to look at, okay, this is scalable. We spoke to a lot more doctors as well. And then we decided to simply do the first game. And ironically, the first client was the same department that bought the actual machine. It was the same hospital, at least, that bought the cold machine. And we just went back. Again, we're a group of engineers, entrepreneurs at the same time. And we took one of those manuals. We made it into a video game. And that was also when things like Angry Birds were coming out. So we did it in exactly the same way. Phase 1, learn how to turn on the machine. You don't turn on the machine by just clicking on. There's certain, sequence that you have to do as well. Think about when you turn on an aircraft as well. You have to turn this, and then you turn it on. And then level 2 is do settings, 1, 2, 3, and so on and so forth. And to finish the first, or to get to level 2, you have to finish level 1, and then you unlock, and so on and so forth. So we completely gamified it. We gave it to them. They loved it. They used it for training. And then the rest is history. And that became a completely different company as well.
This happened though after the IC Solutions endeavor, right? In terms of time.
So that had a bit of an overlap. As well. And there was a full split of the two companies, creating a completely separate company as well that my co-founder was heading at the time. And that company definitely still exists today.
So much to take away from what you just said. The first one is the problem solving or problem seeking mindset. And it's a recurring theme as I speak to entrepreneurs on the podcast, which is look at the people you're in touch with, you're in contact with, and spot common pain points.
Yeah.
And it was just really interesting to see how your eyes and ears were perceptive for that.
Absolutely.
Which is, we're here for this solution to test the impact of cold water on pain, and then suddenly by chance you've heard this complaint over and over again in doctors or from doctors in some of the best hospitals in the country.
Yep.
So if these doctors are suffering, then you can just only imagine what doctors in other cities and countries in Europe are going through as well.
Absolutely.
And then the other thing is taking the initiative and saying, how can I provide more value to the same client to benefit both of us? Because one saying that's really common out there is the relationship with the clients actually starts and not ends after the first sale.
Absolutely.
When you sell them the first time, now you've built that relationship of I've provided enough value where you've given me a certain amount of money.
Yes.
But now you can leverage this to get to know them personally. You get to know them on a deeper level. You get to expand other issues.
And they kept working with us. And this is the power of actually on one side doing good client management,
Absolutely.
but also building a trustworthiness between the two parties, because eventually they were dealing with the cooling company, and then Ice Solutions, whether it came, it went, they bought this product, they liked it, they didn't like it, but they trusted us. They said, you guys are able to solve a problem. You've done it well. It's not ideal, but you've done it well. And then, ironically, every single time they give us a call, it was me or the other co-founder at the time getting into a car and going there. Morning, night, weekend, it doesn't matter. My machine isn't working, come fix it. So the beautiful part of it is when you're doing it for a sports team, you're getting directly, in between the players, pretending like you're fixing the actual device. But at the same time, they actually saw this as, gold to them. Because typically, especially in if you look at a lot of the places in Europe, customer service or the value, or rather the setup of customer service is completely different than Middle East or the US, for example. The customer is always right. They don't have this.
In Europe, they don't have this.
It's completely different. It's a different perspective. So when you say the customer is always right and you actually act as the customer is always right, it's a beautiful surprise. And at the end of the day, a device like this, a game is going on, and within 45 minutes, the team is going to come and sit in the tub, and I need that to be cold, and the device is not cooling. I need help now. I don't need to send an email for 2 hours for someone to reply, and then they send a technician and so on and so forth, right? So the fact that we were able to actually be very, very close to the clients, it helped us tremendously, because that gives you the ability, or rather the luxury, to have a B product, to experiment. So everybody says A team, B product is better
That's a nice statement.
than an A product and a B team. But this is on the management team side. But I truly, truly believe that A customer service and a B product is completely better than a product and a B customer service. So obviously you want to design your product or your service that you don't need service.
Of course.
But eventually it will be there. So if you're there for your clients, they know you, they trust you. And this is something that it's still in our existing company today. We focus so much, we focus religiously on the client, that you could be the more expensive service. You could be the lower, potentially low quality, but hopefully not too low of a quality. But they know you, they trust you. And in the Middle East, it's human sales. If you look at how sales takes place in countries like Germany, for example, it's almost exclusively value-based. This gives me good value. That's what I want. At the right price point, I'll buy it. In the US, it's also very similar. But in the Middle East, I found in working with different teams, different cultures, and different countries as well, here across the Middle East, I like you, I buy from you. I trust you, I buy from you. Again, you could be the more expensive, you could be the lower quality product. I like you, I buy from you. And this is super, super important when you're launching a business over here and you want to maintain basically the business.
And ideally, you want to just have an overlap between both.
Absolutely.
Awesome customer service, great relationship building, but also a killer product that's innovative and really, really gives the client a feeling that they've really got a lot for their money.
Absolutely. I mean, we always say the ideal product never needs customer service
Exactly.
because then your customer service is more customer success. What can I upsell rather than, how can I help you support in the areas that you have? But that never happens. At the end of the day, as well as you build your product, a big part of the customer is the customer usage. The customer success or the customer support is the customer usage. You have an amazing product. I don't know how to use it. A lot of people don't think about this, but it sounds trivial. I think we all heard about the story of, putting your dog in the microwave and there's no note at the dog, these are the cliche stories as well. Or I ordered the coffee and it was too hot. I spilled it on myself. I burnt myself. But these are actual stories. These are actual stories that actually, eventually happen. And you have to think about these things when you're designing a product.
What did you learn from ISIS Solutions in terms of the use of capital that helped you in the second endeavor? Because if the company still exists, that means a lot had to go right for it to sustain all the tests of time and the test of COVID and the test of the, just doing business for that long.
Yeah.
So what are some of the immediate learnings that you can think of especially in terms of not running out of money?
Well, I mean, this is a very, very tricky question when you look at money itself, because every business is completely different. But in terms of steps you have to keep in mind, for sure, raising or having more capital than what you think you need at the very early stages.
Is there a formula? Because I've heard people say this, and people sometimes they 1.5x, 2x, 3x. Was there some formula that you use?
I don't dare say a formula, but I tell you that the buffer that you need increases with every stage. So when you're in the very seed stage, you're looking for, let's say, under half a million dollars, for example, in that regard. And I think if you look at our region versus in the US versus Europe and versus other places, the definition of seed and Series A in terms of raising is completely different. But in the early stages, seed stages where you need just enough money to prove the market as well, to look at the scalability of the market, to maybe even design your first product, that part you need just a little bit more. So I would say it's probably 1.2. If you think you need 500,000, 1.2 is fantastic. But the other side is you need to convince an investor why you need that much. Remember, when you're pitching to an investor, you are pitching the reason why you need 500,000. So if you're going to say, I need 500,000 and I need an extra 100,000 as a buffer, that doesn't sound as a very nice story. So it obviously needs to be built in the model itself, but definitely plan to have a little bit more. When you're looking at Series A, when you're looking at Series B and so on and so forth. So as you grow, and let's say now I need Series A, $2, $3, $4, $5 million, then you need a bigger buffer, because this is where mistakes happen. This is where you start to not have the best oversight. So when you're in the very early stages, you are literally counting pennies. You're saying, I raised $100,000. Every single penny that I spend, you're definitely not going to take, a hefty salary. You're definitely not going to take a fancy office, or I hope you don't. But you're still counting the pennies to get to the goal that you want, which is a scalable business or a product or a design of an app or the launch of the app or the first 10,000 customers or first 10,000 downloads, whatever it happens to be. But then when you say, okay, now I'm ready for scale, and you successfully raise a Series A, this is where you need to go on a hiring spree. This is where you need a bigger office. This is where you need, more and more engineers to come in. And this is where mistakes start to happen.
And mistakes cost a lot.
And absolutely. And people underestimate, for example, hiring the wrong person. This is, and it's not necessarily the wrong person because something is wrong with that person. It's about that person just simply doesn't fit. I thought that product manager, that developer is going to come and solve everything. Sometimes you hit a jackpot and you get amazing people that are young, they're motivated. And sometimes you get the senior that absolutely, takes it the completely wrong direction. And all of a sudden you're 3 months down in time, much more than salary. It's exactly the same. We're on a growth trajectory. We're doing fantastic. I need an office space for 40 people. You still 4 or 3. But you go and you get that office of 40 people expecting that to happen. And then if things slow down, if eventually you don't grow, if you don't hit your targets, you're stuck with that. So this is where you need a bigger buffer. In Series B, Series C, then you're looking at 30, 40, 50 million, 100 million plus. You're definitely taking over what you need.
Well, I guess by that point anyway, you've learned from your mistakes, right? You don't
Absolutely.
get to there.
Then you get the right people on the ship. Nice. You get the right people on the ship. And this is one very, very important thing for a lot of the founders, especially the first time or young founders, is that they don't know when to move to the side. They don't know when to move to the side.
Moving to the side.
Meaning, let someone who knows how to do this much better than me do it. And the minute you can afford to hire someone who can do operations better than you, customer service better than you, product better than you, fundraising better than you, pay them to do it much better than you can. And this is something that I would definitely do in my next venture as well. Because founding, getting the problem, getting the product out and running, and finding the scalable market is the role of the founders. So when the founders get down and dirty and they say, okay, now I found something that I can grow that is scalable and the market really wants, and at the right price and the right value to the clients, now is the time to scale. So this is where you get money from investors. But this is where you can also go and find who is the best person who can lead operations if it's a product, or customer success, or sales, or account management. And it certainly won't be me. I know that already. No matter what I do next, I know it won't be me.
Several interesting questions I have in mind based on what you said. I think I'm going to focus first on finding the right talent. I once heard a statement that said, I never knew how important the right people were until I mistakenly hired the superstar.
Absolutely.
Everyone else was average. Based on your experience now, because you've been an entrepreneur since before you graduated, and you've gone through the hiring phase multiple times, a lot of people associate great talent with a very hefty paycheck that is usually asked for in the negotiation phase.
Mm-hmm.
But that's not always the case.
Mm-hmm.
So how are you able to sort through the crowd? Obviously, there's nothing such as 100% accuracy or 100% success rate. But how do you do that? And in the long run, look back and say, yeah, I think we've nailed down our hiring process. What do you look for in people?
Well, honestly, it sounds like cliche and it's very hard to actually pin down. But it's a lot more the attitude of the person. So and I've done a lot of hiring mistakes. Some of them were costly. Some of them were just simply, too early as well. And some of them were just plain wrong. Saying, I had the wrong gut feeling about this. Or I had the right gut feeling, and then eventually the gut feeling was wrong in the first place. But actually, specifically, if I look at a certain pattern, a lot of it is the attitude, which is very, very difficult to find in the initial interview. And when I'm talking attitude, I'm talking asking key questions that are about the person. So what do you want out of this? And this is a question I ask so many times, and almost to everybody, especially if they're a key hire, to just simply say, okay, hopefully, we grow together and we work fantastic for the next 4, 5, 6 years. What do you want to do after this job?
Interesting.
What do you want to do after this job? Because our company is going to be a springboard for you. It's amazing if we end up being, 15, 20 years together. But realistically, we're both too young for this. So we're not going to be here, nor am I, a government or a corporate that I'm going to keep my employees for 15, 20 years. So I'm eventually just a springboard for you. And hopefully that springboard is 4 or 5 years in which, it's mutual beneficial for both. But eventually, where do you want to be through me? And that's very difficult for a lot of people to answer. Very difficult for a lot of people to answer. But someone who comes in with a plan, they say, I plan to be, the best product manager out there. I plan to be, sales, and I want to eventually get into corporate sales and so on and so forth. They know where they want to be. They're just not there yet. It's a beautiful answer. But also at the same time, a lot of the times, if they are, either stuttering or not sure or giving an average answer as well, it's perfectly fine to not be sure. But then that you're taking on someone that you need to teach. And the most ideal people that I've worked with are the ones who you would just say, we need this to be done by Thursday. And they probably went through hell to get it done by Thursday. And they had so many problems, but they came back and sorted out themselves. And they said, it's done. And, these are the type of reliable people that you can really, really grow. And you need them desperately in the first few years or in the first few months of starting a company in itself, because you have little time to babysit. You're anyway working on so many different things at the same time. But those people that will eventually, take on the responsibility and ideally even create opportunity. So take on a responsibility and create opportunity will just free up so much of your mind as a founder. And this is where the role of either a co-founder, and a lot of co-founders, they come later, by the way. So there's always a founder and then a second co-founder joins later, or someone who joins a year later and they call them a third co-founder and so on and so forth. And it joins exactly the same. So
I'm curious, these individuals that are coming in, they're ambitious, they know their value, and they know that you've chosen them because they're focused, they're good, they deliver on time. Out of curiosity, do these people usually ask for more money as a salary, or are they more of long-term thinkers and say, hey, maybe we can discuss the compensation package, include a little bit of equity, or maybe I'll start a little bit slow. Once we take off in a year and a half, we'll go through serious renegotiations
Yep.
of the salary contract. So how has it worked based on your experience?
So I mean, from my experience, the younger ones, they don't know their own value yet.
Mm.
They don't know their own value yet. And in our company today and the previous ones as well, we've had interns that jumped quadrupled their salary within a year
Quadrupled.
because you raise money. I mean, you're starting very low anyway, but when you raise money, you have those funds. It's much better to invest in the people you want to keep and give that value in terms of the input that they're giving you, better than going to hire more. This is what I believe. So I would much rather elevate who I have to get them into a phase where they see that, okay, now we've raised. This means we can afford to keep our team happy, to give them appreciation, than to spend it on an expensive new hire. This is typically how I see it myself. But eventually, is it directly related to the salary? I don't see a pattern that I've seen in which this person is very reliable, but they're demanding 20,000, 30,000, and so on and so forth. Obviously, with few exceptions. Few exceptions is when it's in the growth phase and when they come recommended.
Okay.
So the recommendation is very key, because we have a lot of entrepreneurship groups or organizations, and it's always in the circles. I'm at the growth phase where right now I need someone to just help me fly. I need to go from 10 clients to 100 clients very fast. Who do you know? And these questions, they fly all around. And whether people that I worked with before or I'm working with now, I definitely know who I need to keep on the ship and who I need to call when I get into that phase. And it's the same that you can share with someone else, especially if it's people that you parted ways with because maybe I left or because they had to leave the company. Certainly recommendation goes a long way in that regard. And good people cost money. Good people cost money.
And when they deliver, that's the best feeling in the world, because
Absolutely.
they're making progress.
Absolutely.
I want to read you the statistic that I have, and it so happened that you mentioned this in passing. So I was looking at the leading countries in terms of VC investments,
Mhm.
and this is based on Statista as of January 2025.
Mhm.
The top three are the usual ones. You have the US, 200 billion, China, 38 billion, UK, 16 billion. The
Absolutely.
UAE ranks number 16 globally
Mhm.
with $2 billion in terms of VC investments. However, according to Middle East Business, the UAE has ranked first for the third year in a row in terms of the best country to start and conduct new businesses.
Mhm.
So, based on what you said, obviously having investments in your company can be detrimental to your success in different ways. But especially when you compare the, let's say, disparity in the investments across different regions, do you feel like this would demotivate certain people or put certain people at a disadvantage? Or is there a way to maybe bootstrap for a little bit longer? How do you interpret the statistic that I just read? Or is it more of an incentive for someone to pack up their stuff, open in the US, where there's maybe a higher chance of them raising a funding round? How do you see this?
Well, I mean, obviously those statistics are amazing if you're in the top 3 countries in itself. But remember that the way investors work, it's always a matter of, if I give you money, I need it back with a multiplier. And if you go somewhere where the multiplier isn't there, you're going to get a lot less money or different money. I just simply call it different money. So in the UAE, although the number is minuscule compared to the US, but over here also, at the end of the day, you don't have those multipliers. So we don't have the scale what we have in the US, where you'd put $1 million in a company, and then the chances of that million becoming 10 million, 15, 20, 1 billion even, just simply don't exist. So at the end of the day, if you look at percentages, it's not incredibly different. But if you look at the actual amount, it obviously could be. Now, the UAE has done, you mentioned first 3 years in a row, obviously has done tremendous strides in terms of the ease of doing business, the ease of starting a company. But still, what's lacking is the exits. Still, what's lacking is the amount of money that's going on there, which is still a growing ecosystem. Remember, I started also in the UAE close to 10 years ago, in which we were working with startups, with investors. And whether here or in Europe or in the UK or in the US, the process is very much exactly the same when you're looking at raising money, which is you need to get under the skin of the investors very early on and get their trust that this is something that could work. Now, purely from the funds that are available and also the type of people that you meet, it's not on the same scale with the US, with the UK, and so on and so forth. But today here, there's plenty of money to go around, but there aren't plenty of stories of exits. So, and we have to look at ourselves as entrepreneurs as well. We are not, the shining armor to come and say, give me your million, I'm going to turn it into 10 million and 13 billion and so on and so forth. Those stories are still far in between as well. So at the end of the day, it's still a growing ecosystem. We are probably not going to get at all to the level of getting to the US, but still raising money is an art. I really see it as an art. It's something that it's a very delicate dance with someone, and I take it between myself and you or anybody, in which let's not call it an investment in a startup. Let's call it when you want to buy something. You see the value, you see the opportunity, and how many times did you spend money and think this was a very stupid purchase? We've all been guilty of doing that as well.
Absolutely.
But then at the same time, you spend on something, and then you're still very happy about it. And it's exactly the same when you're looking at angel investors, which is people who are investing their own money. You really need to convince them that this is something which is worth taking your hard-earned savings. Give it to me. I'll build it into a company. It might fail. Maybe there's an 80+% chance it fail, but I'm working on building something. And that is purely trustworthy. This is purely, are you trustworthy? Is it someone that, are you actually building a nice story? And when you're raising money, you never ask money on the first time. You meet once and you say, you know what? I'm working on something like this. Maybe let's meet in the next 1 to 2 months. And you specifically want to say where you want to be in those 2 months. So I plan to launch my product in 2 months. This is what I'm doing. I would absolutely love to have a cup of coffee with you in 2 months and tell you about it. And when you meet in 2 months, you really, really need to make sure that you got. And it could be a tiny plan that you plant in his head. But, oh yeah, we launched a product. We don't have any downloads. But in 2 more months, I think we're going to get to 50 downloads. And by the second, by the third, when you're, getting someone on the hook, this is like, when you're watching a Netflix show, you don't get hooked from the first episode, or rarely get hooked. But by the time you see the second and third, what's another 10 more? Let's finish it. So it's something very similar. You need to get that series as well of meetings, of building a connection with an angel investor. And then before you can ask for money and close the deal. When you look at VCs, they look at it in a completely different way. So venture capitalists, you have to always keep in mind, they're investing someone else's money. So I have a bucket of money that is 10 million, 20 million, 50, 100 million, but it's not my money. I'm just managing it. So my job is to give 10 startups $1 million each, and one of them better make that 10 million all come back, and then some.
So they're more likely to take a risk on you.
So on one side, they could take a risk, but also at the other side, they're doing a job and they're assessing it in a completely different way. I might like you, I might trust you. Obviously, that helps a lot. But at the end of the day, I'm managing someone else's money. I'm even more careful than managing my own money. So still in the UAE, I think there's plenty of money to go around. And at the end of the day, the exits are the ones that determine. If I'm giving 10 people $1 million each, I need at least one of them to return the entire fund plus. So if I give all of you $1 million and one of you makes 10 million back, I'm a really bad investor, because I spent 2 to 3 years, and lifetime of funds are usually 7 years. So I spent 2 to 3 years investing 10 million, getting 10 million back. That's not a very good investment manager. So you would actually want to bet on the right horse, and it's already a very difficult decision for them.
On this point, I read this statistic, and it says According to Harvard Business Review, most startups fail, and more than 2/3 never deliver a positive return to investors.
Mhm.
So, on your point, it's a losing game. It's a losing numbers game.
Absolutely.
And I wanted to ask you, what industries right now do you think? Because you've tried, you've worked and successfully launched businesses in several industries. So, which ones do you see that are still ripe for disruption, and where these odds are a little bit more in your favor? If someone's listening to this and they have some money on the side and they're just kind of scanning the market, do you have an answer at the top of your head?
I'm not too standard and unconventional on these things. I truly believe that every single industry still has some room for. I mean, disruption maybe is a big word in itself, but has room of the delivering values. And today, we see plenty of entrepreneurs in the F&B industry, restaurants that it was a tiny restaurant, all of a sudden became a chain. Chocolate, you go viral with the chocolate as well, and so on and so forth. Or you're building this amazing AI tool that you wake up with a valuation of $1 billion, because right now it's a nice hot topic. So in my mind, it's not so much about the industry. Obviously, now if you just look at industries, AI is tremendous, has tremendous potential as well in the next few years, and eventually it's going to let's say become in every single branch of our world. AI robotics is going to be huge as well. But this is the stuff that we read in the news. And this is the stuff that we see the hype as well. Whether hype in investments coming in or hype in amazing innovations that are coming in, that will continue to go. But at the end of the day, entrepreneurship in someone's DNA is about finding a problem, finding the right solution, and finding a scalable business model for that solution. So the right team on board, looking at the right problem and giving it the right time to say, okay, again, we've sold to customer 1, 2, 3, 4, 10, 15, and they all have the exact same problem that we are solving. I have a scalable business. This is something you could do in any industry, in every industry as well. And we will keep hearing about someone getting into something as old as real estate or something as old as e-commerce. Today, do we need another e-commerce platform? I'm pretty sure we will have another e-commerce platform that will come selling clothes or plain items or groceries and so on and so forth that will do better than what's existing today, because they did shipping right, they did returns right, they did marketing right, and so on and so forth. So there's plenty of innovation to go around in this regard. So every industry is ripe as long as you have the right team and you're looking at the right problem to solve.
Yeah, based on your story as well, the right problem to solve could also have a lot to do with the timing.
Absolutely.
Right? Not being too early.
Absolutely.
One question I want to wrap up with is based on an interesting study I came across, and you mentioned this briefly. So, starting up with a founder or with a co-founder versus on your own.
Mm-hmm.
When we have two sides of the argument, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, one study found that 80% of billion-dollar startups were built by 2 to 3 founders or co-founders. And then you have another study, or it was a survey, according to Octopus Group. 87% of entrepreneurs believe that having a co-founder has made their business more powerful.
Yep.
So this is the side that's more towards having someone with you. Now, in terms of being alone, there is a study by Wharton School of Business and NYU that shows that single founder startups were more likely to survive and generate higher revenue than businesses built in partnership. And then you have CB Insights found in research on startup failures that 7% of startups fail due to disharmony among the team or even their investors.
Mm-hmm.
So that kind of also highlights that not every investor who has the money you're looking for is a good one.
Absolutely.
But I want to focus on your take, because I feel like a lot of the ventures that you've went on to have or start, you did with other co-founders. So what's your take on this argument?
Well, I mean, this argument is absolutely right. And by the way, being a single founder does put you at a disadvantage with investors, because investors, they know these statistics much more than entrepreneurs do. And they'd rather bet on a team rather than bet on a horse, on a single horse. And this is just, if you want to look at statistics at the end of the day, they'd rather bet on a team. 1, because of the diversity. 2, because of, at the end of the day, the reduced risk of someone doing it. And I don't believe that single founders have ever created something by themselves. It's about, you founded it by yourself. Maybe on paper, you started it yourself. You had the idea about yourself. But immediately or soon after, you found the right team around you. right? So Steve Jobs had Wozniak at the same time. Zuckerberg, for example, also his team with Marissa was a big part of how do we move to the next level and how do I grow and how do I do this with the right team. Maybe on paper it was a single founder, but I cannot say this enough. Being an entrepreneur is an extremely lonely job. It's a very, very lonely place. So if you're gonna run through all the ideas and all the problems and all the stress by yourself, it's something that mentally is extremely tasking. We don't talk about this enough. The mental burden that you have on entrepreneurs is tremendous. So if you're a single founder, I think it's multiplier of what you have when you're a co-founder, because at the end of the day, when one is feeling down, the rest is still working. But also at the same time, when you want to make a decision, you have someone to complement what you are doing or to bounce ideas off. And mentally, we are at the end of the day, we're social beings. If it's a robot running a company, no emotions, I might think possible. But as social beings, doing anything by yourself is no fun. Even, unless you're traveling just because you want to travel backpack, you want to come back. And at the end of the day, interact with people, and you do, and you interact with people. So the mental toughness that you need to be a single founder is tremendous. And eventually you will find the right people around you to not be a single founder.
That's the aim. Thank you so much, man. I mean, we just scratched the surface in this 1 hour, but the amount of value that you provided, the amount of the openness to share the ups and the downs and the mistakes and the learnings were great. So thank you for that.
And the downs are many more than the ups as well. So, but we need hours of that as well.
Absolutely. But thank you so much for making the time. And it was a pleasure having you over.
Pleasure is mine.